His name was Alexandre Dujarier, and by all accounts, he had everything ahead of him. He was one of the most promising young men in Paris, owner of the newspaper with the largest circulation in France, connected to everyone who mattered, wealthy, charming, respected. The kind of man that other men quietly measured themselves against at dinner parties. And then he met Lola Montez. She was a dancer, Irish by birth, Spanish by invention, magnetic by design. She had reinvented herself completely, new name, new accent, new mythology. She had a gift for entering rooms in ways that made people forget what they were talking about before she walked in. She needed Dujarier. Her career was fading, and he was the city's most powerful drama critic, so she found out his habits. She discovered he rode his horse every morning in the same park. She showed up one day on horseback, accidentally crossed his path, and within weeks, she had moved into his apartment. For a while, things were good. He started helping her career. He told his friends he planned to marry her in the spring. He was, by every account, completely enchanted. And then, his life began to fall apart. Slowly at first. Then, all at once, his business fortunes changed. Influential friends started to drift away. One night at a party, drunk and out of character, he insulted a man named Beauvaillon, one of the finest pistol shots in France. A duel was arranged. Dujarier tried to apologize. The duel happened anyway. He was killed. He was one of the most promising men in Paris, and he was dead at the peak of his potential, having never understood what had actually happened to him. That is how infection works. You never feel it entering. Law 10 of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power carries one of the most uncomfortable truths in the entire book, because it forces you to look at the people around you, people you may care about, people you feel loyal to, people who may seem like victims of terrible luck, and ask a question that feels almost cruel. Is this person's misfortune something that happened to them, or something they carry with them? And the follow-up question, the one that cuts even deeper, how much of it are they transferring to me? Greene calls it infection, and he is not speaking loosely. He means it as a clinical term. Emotional states, he argues, are as contagious as diseases. You breathe them in without knowing. You absorb the patterns of the people you spend the most time with, their thinking, their energy, their relationship with luck, their relationship with disaster. The unhappy and unstable don't just carry their misery, they radiate it. And the closer you stand, the more thoroughly you absorb it. Now, before we go further, there is an important distinction Greene makes that you need to hold on to. He is not talking about people who have suffered genuinely tragic circumstances beyond their control. He is not saying abandon your friend who lost their job in a recession, or cut off your family member who got sick. Compassion for people defeated by forces outside themselves is not only human, it's civilized. He is talking about something different. He is talking about a specific type of person. The person whose problems follow them like a shadow. The person who has had 5 different careers and every single one of them ended because of someone else's fault. The person whose relationships always collapse because they were betrayed. The person for whom life is a continuous, rotating cast of villains and bad luck, and they are always, always the victim at the center. That person is not unlucky. That person is infectious. Lola Montez moved to Munich after Paris. She set her sights on King Ludwig of Bavaria, an intelligent, respected ruler who had governed wisely for years. She engineered her introduction to him through his aide, staged an accidental fall from her horse at the aide's feet, and within 55 hours of finally meeting the king, she was performing on the Bavarian stage at his personal arrangement. Ludwig was bewitched. That's the exact word he used. He began appearing with her publicly. He bought her an apartment on the most fashionable boulevard in Munich. He showered her with gifts. He made her a countess. He had a palace built for her. He allowed her to advise him on cabinet appointments and political policy, and began firing anyone who dared criticize her. The stable, prosperous, beloved kingdom of Bavaria began to fracture. Riots broke out in the streets. Students marched chanting, "Raus mit Lola, get Lola out." The Bavarians who had adored their king for decades now openly mocked him. Civil unrest spread through the entire realm. In 1848, under unbearable pressure, Ludwig was forced to exile Lola from Bavaria. 5 weeks later, he was forced to abdicate entirely. A king dethroned because he stood too close to a woman who had already destroyed every man who had stood close to her before. After Dujarrier died in Paris, she moved to Bavaria and destroyed Ludwig. After Bavaria, she moved to England and married a young army officer named George Heald, 10 years her junior, from one of the finest families in the country. They fled to Spain after she was arrested for bigamy. He lost his military commission. He was ostracized from English society. He moved to Portugal. He died young in a boating accident, having lost nearly everything. The man who published her autobiography went bankrupt. Do you see the pattern? Because this is exactly what Greene needs you to see. Not any single tragedy, but the trail. The long, unbroken trail of collapsed men, derailed careers, destabilized kingdoms, and broken lives stretching behind one person like wreckage behind a hurricane. You have to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question here. If the pattern is so destructive and the wreckage so obvious, why do brilliant, powerful people keep opening the door? Dujarrier was a ruthless media baron. King Ludwig was a seasoned, highly educated monarch. These were not naive men. They were strategic. They understood power. So how did they get infected? Because the infection doesn't target your weakness. It targets your ego. When a chronic victim enters your life, they rarely lead with their chaos. They lead with a story of profound misunderstanding. They tell you how the world has wronged them. And right there, your cognitive biases activate. Specifically, a dangerous cocktail of the savior complex and exceptionalism. Your ego whispers a very seductive lie. It tells you, those other people failed this person because they weren't smart enough or patient enough. But I am different. I have the intellect to guide them. I can fix them. You feel a biological rush. Your brain actually rewards you for being the protector, the superior intellect stepping in to solve the unsolvable puzzle. You think you are projecting strength. In reality, you are volunteering to be the next host. If you let unchecked empathy drive the vehicle, you will crash. Empathy is a tool for understanding human nature, but it must never be the architect of your strategy. The infector weaponizes your empathy. They don't just want your help, they want your stability to anchor their instability. They act as a parasite on your focus. While you are busy putting out their fires, who is running your empire? Nobody. Let's pull this out of the 19th century courts and look at the modern mirror. In 2026, Lola Montez is not staging a fall from a horse in a Bavarian park. She is sitting across from you in a boardroom. He is the new executive hire, joining your Slack channel. They are the brilliant freelancer whose portfolio is stunning, but who carries a trail of broken contracts and non-disclosure agreements. When you check their references, there is always a complicated excuse. It was a toxic work culture. The investors lacked vision. The last co-founder was narcissistic. Watch how the modern infector operates. They are exceptionally gifted at reading the room. They flatter your intelligence. They align with your frustrations. They make you feel like you are the only one who truly understands their genius. Then the friction begins. Small things at first. A missed deliverable because of a sudden personal crisis. A conflict with a key client where the client was supposedly unreasonable. You step in, you use your hard-earned reputation to cover for them. You send the emails to smooth things over. You are now actively managing their wreckage. You are absorbing their disease. Let's look at this chessboard from both sides, the predator and the prey. The most dangerous thing about the infector is that they rarely operate with conscious malice. The worst of them do not see themselves as predators. They operate with the terrifying, authentic conviction that they are perpetually the prey. They genuinely believe the universe is against them. If they were calculating liars, your analytical mind would catch them immediately. But because they believe their own delusion, their pain looks real. Your instinct to protect traps you. And you, the actual prey, how do you think? You fall into the sunk cost fallacy. You have already invested time, money, and your own reputation in defending them. Admitting they are a walking disaster means admitting your own judgment was flawed. A strategic mind hates being wrong. So, you double down. You try harder, and the virus spreads deeper into your system. You start losing sleep. Your healthy relationships suffer. You become paranoid, irritable, exhausted. This is why you must operate with a cold, detached lens. When you evaluate people, you must strip away their tears, their compelling stories, and their charismatic excuses. You must look exclusively at their historical data. What is their track record? Does success follow them, or does sudden, catastrophic failure follow them? The tape does not lie. Now, imagine a what-if scenario. What if Dujarier had just tipped his hat to the dancer in the park and ridden away? What if King Ludwig had simply enjoyed her performance and sent her back to Paris? What if, when that new candidate sat in your office complaining about their last 3 bosses, you simply smiled, thanked them for their time, and threw their resume in the trash? Nothing. That is the beauty of it. The storm simply breaks over someone else's head. You do not have to defeat the infector. You just have to not invite them inside. So, how do you cure the infection once you spot it? You don't. Pause. You cannot cure them. You cannot outthink their chaos, because chaos does not play by the rules of logic. If you try to fight them, you enter their element. They have decades of experience surviving in the mud of their own making. You are just a tourist. The only strategic response is ruthless, silent quarantine. This is not about being cruel. It is about self-preservation. Compassion is for those struck by lightning. Quarantine is for those who walk around carrying a lightning rod, wondering why things keep catching fire. When you recognize the symptoms, the constant drama, the rotating villains, the perpetual victimhood, you do not try to heal them. You do not explain your departure. You cut the oxygen. You become emotionally unresponsive. You step back and let them drift away to find another savior. Power is not just about what you build. It is about what you protect. Your energy, your clarity, and your time are finite resources. Do not hand them over to someone who is drowning and looking for a head to push under so they can catch a breath. Surround yourself with the fortunate. Associate with the happy, the stable, the ones who build things instead of breaking them. Because just as misery is contagious, so is success. Choose your infections wisely. But there is a final, darker question we have to ask before we close this chapter. It is the question almost no one wants to ask, because the human brain is biologically wired to reject the answer. Daniel Kahneman, the brilliant psychologist who mapped out how our minds actually work, taught us that the ego is the ultimate defense attorney. It will build an impenetrable wall of excuses to protect you from seeing your own flaws. It uses something called confirmation bias to filter out any evidence that you might be the problem, while magnifying every piece of evidence that the world is being unfair to you. So take a deep breath, step outside of your own ego for a second, and look in the mirror. What if the infection is you? How would you know? Because if you are the carrier, you are the last person to feel the symptoms. You won't feel toxic. You will just feel incredibly, consistently unlucky. Look back at your own trail over the last 5 years. Look at the jobs you have left, the friendships that have ended, the partnerships that have dissolved. If there is a constant theme of betrayal, if you are always the one who was misunderstood, underappreciated, or backstabbed by a rotating cast of different people, you have to face a terrifying mathematical probability. The only common denominator in all those failed equations is you. We hate this thought. It feels like an attack. But strategically, it is the most liberating truth you can accept. Because if the world is out to get you, you are powerless. But if you are the architect of your own chaos, then you have the power to stop building it. Pause. You can change the blueprint. You can stop demanding that the world accommodate your emotional turbulence and start taking responsibility for the energy you bring into the room. But let's assume your self-audit comes back clean. You are not the virus. You are just a person trying to build something meaningful, trying to protect your peace and your potential. How do you apply Law 10 in the real world, right now, today? You conduct a ruthless audit of your environment. You have to look at your inner circle, your friends, your business partners, your team, not through the lens of history or loyalty or how much fun you had in college. You must look at them through the lens of energy transfer. Ask yourself this: When your phone rings and you see a certain name on the screen, what happens to your body? Does your stomach tighten? Do you feel a sudden, invisible weight drop onto your shoulders? Do you let it ring a few extra times while you mentally prepare yourself for whatever crisis or complaint is waiting on the other end? That physical reaction is not random. It is your nervous system doing the math that your conscious mind is too polite to do. Your body knows you are about to be infected. In the modern digital age, infection doesn't just happen in a Parisian parlor. It happens in your inbox. It happens in your WhatsApp groups. It happens when you open an app and immediately absorb the outrage, the cynicism, and the chronic complaining of people who have made a brand out of their own misery. You consume their anxiety with your morning coffee, and you wonder why you feel exhausted by noon. The counter strategy here is not just defensive, it is highly offensive. Robert Greene doesn't just tell us to avoid the unhappy and the unlucky. The second half of Law 10 is the ultimate growth hack. Associate with the happy and the fortunate. Infection works both ways. Success, clarity, and relentless optimism are just as contagious as misery. Think about the people who seem to have a magnetic relationship with good luck. You know the ones. They enter a stagnant market and suddenly opportunities appear. They face a massive setback, and within a week, they have reframed it into an advantage. They don't sit around analyzing the unfairness of the game, they just find a new way to play it. These people are super carriers of a different kind of virus. They infect you with ambition, they infect you with a higher standard of execution. When you spend time with them, your own limitations suddenly look ridiculous. You start adopting their habits, you start mimicking their resilience, you breathe in their momentum. Pause. Alexandre Dujarier had everything ahead of him. He had the intellect, the resources, and the platform to shape the culture of an entire nation. But he forgot that potential is incredibly fragile. He let the wrong energy pass his gates, and he lost everything in a senseless duel that wasn't even his to fight. Your potential is just as fragile, and it is just as valuable. You are the sole protector of your mental real estate. You are the gatekeeper of your own focus. Do not apologize for being selective. Do not feel guilty for stepping away from the chaos. If someone is drowning by their own hand, you can throw them a life raft, you can call for help, but you do not jump in the water with them. Keep your shores clear, protect your peace, and only open your doors to the people who bring the sun.